The first scream cuts the prairie like a bullet, sharp and lonely, and it is not fear, it is pain, the kind that turns a voice to wire. Rhett Callahan stops at the broken fence with the windmill ticking behind him and the sun pressing everything flat. A shape staggers out of the tall grass. A woman, barefoot, dress torn, shins and knees scored by barbed wire. She grabs the strand and holds on as if the land is trying to tip her away. Then he sees the wound. A long cut across her right hip, the cloth fused to skin by dried blood and heat, dark as iron. She tries to rip it free and a sound escapes her, small and fierce. He drops to one knee, swings off the saddlebag, pulls a knife, linen, whiskey, his hands steady when they touch work. He lifts his eyes to her face. Young, stubborn, dust on her lashes like frost. "Don't," she whispers. "Let me take it off first." The wind seems to hold its breath. Even his horse stands still. He understands. Not shame. Survival. He slides steel under cloth and cuts slow, careful, freeing skin from stiff fabric. Blood wakes bright and fresh. She claws dirt, jaw locked. He pours whiskey on blade and wound. Her back arches and then settles. He pads and binds with linen, tight enough to hold. "Easy," he murmurs. "You're safe." He knows it is not true. Her eyes keep sliding north, toward the old trail where dust draws a line like a threat. "Water," she says. He tips the canteen. She coughs, half laughs through the hurt. "Burns worse than whiskey." "Means it works," he says. She holds the bandage with one hand and searches a torn pocket with the other. She pulls out folded paper, creased and stained, red wax mostly gone but not forgotten. He takes it. He knows the weight and smell of official pages. When he opens it, time goes thin. Certificate of marriage by proxy under Reverend Amos Bell, witnessed and marked. The bride is Eliza Hale. The groom is Rhett Callahan. His name sits black and plain as a brand. He reads twice without sound and once more fast. "Where did you get this?" "From my father before he died," she says. "He knew Reverend Bell. He made it legal in case I had to run. He told me to find Rhett Callahan near Goodnight Flats. He said you were a man who paid his debts. Rhett has not seen Amos Bell since a wet night near the end of the war when Mercy outran orders. The old handwriting looks like a road he forgot, but still knows. Your father. Jonah Hale, she says. They came as taxmen for the railroad. No badges. Papers signed by men who never broke ground. They burned our place. He pushed the letter into my hand and told me to run. He said strangers would be family long enough to keep me breathing. She swallows and stares at the horizon as if it might argue. Rhett folds the paper and tucks it inside his vest. The wind shifts. Somewhere far, hooves, or wind, or fear making noise. We have to move, he says. He lifts her up. She leans because she must, not because she breaks. The cabin is cedar and shade and stubborn door. Inside it smells like coffee and dry wood and a man who keeps his life quiet. He eases her onto the bed, props her leg to level the hip, adds clean cloth under the bandage. Lie still, he says. I need to stay married, she says, and the words fall like a hammer on a peg that was waiting. He hangs his hat, squares his shoulders. On paper, I am your husband. In fact, I am a stranger. On paper, I am your wife, she says. In fact, I am the trouble at your fence. The law will not shield me if I stand alone. It will not hear me unless I wear your name. If you want me gone when this is done, I will go. But I cannot leave now and live. He finds the Bible his mother made him keep. Dust lies on it like a thin winter. He wipes it with 2 fingers and hears the windmill tick through the wall. Bell might be at Cottonwood Bend, he says. If I send for him, he will come, but we may not have time. We have less, she says, eyes to the window where heat bends the distance. He hears hooves now, clean and sure. He checks the rifle by the door, counts cartridges, wishes for more. He sits by the bed and meets her eyes. If we do this, we do it clean. No lies inside these walls. Clean, she says. And fast. He opens to where the pages fall by habit, the words worn by use. Eliza Hale, he says, quiet and steady. Do you consent to this marriage now for your protection under God's eye until either of us releases the other? I do, she says, color returning under dust. Rhett Callahan, she says, breath thin. Do you consent to take me as wife on paper and in duty, to keep me safe until I can stand under my own name? I do, he says, and something heavy inside him loosens and then sets. He places her palm on the Bible and lays his hand over hers. He says the old words as best he can, not as preacher, as witness. He ends with a soldier's nod. By these words and these hands, he says, we are married. She smiles crooked and real. Then husband, she says, help me stand. He helps her to the porch. Afternoon leans hard. 2 riders appear at the north, black coats and sun, the easy slouch of men who never ask. They stop at the cottonwood. The tall one lifts his chin. You, Rhett Callahan. You have my wife, Rhett says, each word a nail. The man smiles thin. Baron Silas Vane regrets he cannot collect her himself. He sends us. She is claimed. The law is with him. Eliza stands straight against the post, pale and steady, one hand on the linen. The law is not a man who burns farms, she says. The law is papers and witness. The short rider spits. You got papers. We do, Rhett says. Then bring her down. The tall man taps the butt of his gun to his thigh. Or we come up and the papers bleed red. Rhett's rifle points at boards, not men. His feet set wide. This porch is mine, he says. This fence is mine. My wife stands under my roof. You've said your piece. The smile dies. Nickel flashes. The first shot splits the rail. Rhett drops and fires once. The tall man spins and falls like a sack onto hard sun. The short rider freezes, eyes wide, then jerks his horse so sharp the animal screams. Vane will take the whole valley, he yells as he runs. He'll salt your water and burn your dead. Dust swallows him. Silence lowers itself back in pieces. Rhett checks the fallen man, though he knows. He drags the body off the step and covers the face with the coat. Eliza comes to his side, careful on the boards. She sees the thin blood on his forearm from a splinter. You're hurt, she says. I've been worse, he says, and the truth in it almost makes them smile. The windmill ticks. A hawk calls like a hinge. He pockets the empty shell. He keeps firsts. They will be back, he says, with more men and less talk. Then we cannot stay, she says, but we cannot run blind. He thinks of Bell, of vows spoken in thunder years ago, of a river crossing and a rope that held. If Bell is still at Cottonwood Bend, he says, he can bind this in law. He can make your name more than paper on my tongue. She closes her eyes, opens them steady. What do you need me to do? Rest 1 hour, he says. Eat what you can. We ride at dusk. Night will hide our dust. All right, she says. Husband. The word sits between them like a small fire. Wife, he says, surprised by how it fits. I keep my debts. He moves through the yard with purpose. Cartridges, jerky, coffee, blanket, needles, thread, soap, lariat. He saddles his gelding and whistles the spare bay in from the far fence. Cinches tight, knots checked, canteen full. Belle's paper tucked close. When he returns, Eliza stands with the porch post in one hand and the other near the bandage, chin up, eyes clear. She looks at the cottonwood where the leaves flash pale undersides as if the tree is telling the sky to pay attention. "You think the world notices when two people choose each other," she says. "The world notices when two people make a stand," he says. He offers his hand. She takes it. They cross the yard as the light turns a deeper brass. The wind lifts thin ghosts of dust around their boots. Somewhere far north, men ride with a name on their tongues and fire in their plans. Here, under a plain sky and a patient windmill, two names have just been hammered together hard enough to ring. He helps her into the saddle with care that does not look like pity. She sets her jaw and finds a way to sit that does not tear the healing edge. He swings up, feels the old click in his shoulder, and breathes through it. "We follow the creek till it breaks east," he says. "Keep to mesquite when we can. If we make the bend by midnight, we have a chance." "We have a chance," she repeats, as if the words themselves can check a fever. They turn the horses toward the low wash where the ground is soft and tracks fail early. The wind thickens and carries the scent of coming weather that may only be dust. Behind them, the cabin holds its shape in the light, and the dead man lies still beneath his coat. Ahead, the land spreads the way it always does, open and honest and not kind. Rhett touches the vest where Belle's paper rests and feels its stiffness against his ribs, a square promise he did not ask for and somehow needed. He glances at Eliza. She keeps her gaze on the trail, but the corner of her mouth shows something that is not fear. "If we live through this," she says, voice low, "I would like the vows under a tree and a song." "If we live through this," he says, "you can have vows and 10 songs." The horses pick up to a careful trot. The sun tips. The windmill ticks slower as if counting them out. They ride into the red dust that gives the place its name and let the evening fold around them like a cloak. The light drops hard across the panhandle, and by the time Rhett Callahan and Eliza Hale reach the dry creek, the world is rust and smoke, the horses whispering in the sand, leather creaking like old words, breath rising in even threads that try to stitch the dark together. Rhett keeps his eyes on the ridge and the pale ribbon of the trail, reading dust the way men read bad weather, one glance back for every 100 steps forward, measuring silence by what it refuses to tell him. Eliza rides straight despite the pulse in her hip, the bandage dark at one corner, her fingers tight on the horn as if she could press hurt back into cloth, her jaw set hard. "How far to Cottonwood Bend?" he says. "If luck holds, half a day," he says. "And if it breaks," she says. "Then we keep riding," he says. The creek twists through mesquite and rock and pockets of sage that breathe cool once the heat falls off, and a coyote writes a thin cry across the low hills like a line scored for a clean snap. They move slower in the moon lanes where the ground shines pale, and the wind carries a click that is not windmill, not the lazy tick of iron on iron, something sharper, careless, human. Rhett slides down, palms the earth, feels a tremor pass into his bones. "Riders," he says. "How many?" she says. "3 or 4, he says. "Yours or his?" she says. "No one out here rides for me," he says. He leads the horses into the deeper cut where the walls rise like broken teeth and the moon pours thin lines along their edges, then climbs to a shelf of stone he once used for coyotes and once for men. He sets the rifle, breathes the way the weapon likes, sights steady on the lantern swinging below like a caught star. 3 shapes drift into view, black coats washed gray by moonlight, scarves up, voices easy with the false safety of night. "He took her," says one. "Vane wants Belle too," says another. "Paper matters," says the first. Rhett presses the trigger. The shot cracks. The lantern bursts. Horses rear. A man drops hard. The others snap rounds wild at shadows. Rock chips jump and sting the air near Rhett's ear, and he rolls from the shelf into the wash and shouts, "Go!" Eliza kicks hard, riding bent low, hair a black ribbon behind her, the nearest rider cutting to block, and Rhett drops the man's horse instead of the man, the beast falling sideways in a spill of dust and iron sound. The rider tumbles, and Rhett meets him with the stock across the jaw, short and clean. The last man runs north with his fear and his message, and Rhett lets him go because some warnings are worth the breath. He reaches Eliza before the ground does. "I told you to run," he says. "I did," she says, but the ground asked questions. He checks the wound. The line is angry, but not wide. He binds tighter with proper cloth and ties a knot that will not slip. "We cannot ride all night," he says. "They will bring more," she says. "Then we pick where to meet them," he says. He knows a shallow cave where cottonwoods cling to a rock wall, a pocket of dry shadow set back from the wash, and he leads the horses there, coaxing the limping bay with a voice that belongs to calmer days. Inside it smells like old smoke and damp stone and a long quiet that will hold if asked. He lights a fire no bigger than a hat, only for light. "You saved me twice now," she says. "You keeping count," he says. "It helps with the pain," she says. He cleans the cut, pours a sting of whiskey, breathes her through it, binds with muslin neat and firm. "Hurts," she says. "Means it is working," he says. "You do not talk much," she says. "Most words do not fix anything," he says. "Some do," she says. "Like safe or home." The fire settles to a red coin, and the cottonwoods outside move like the sea pressed into leaves, and Rhett takes first watch with the rifle across his knees, the cave mouth a black rectangle that frames a thin strip of stars. Eliza sleeps in pockets and wakes in small jolts, and once she says, "I should have brought a different dress," and he almost smiles and says, "There is a store in Cottonwood we can argue with." Dawn comes iron and blue and puts a taste in the mouth. He gives her water and jerky softened in the canteen. "Can you sit a saddle?" he says. "If I can breathe, I can ride," she says. They mount and move as the sun lifts and the shadows stretch behind like ghosts that want to stay. "If we reach Bell," he says, "you will have witness enough to hold your name." "And if we do not," she says. "Then at least Vane will not," he says. They ride a long quiet hour, and she says, "My father said the water under our valley would matter more than gold, that men would kill for water long after coins bored them." And Rhett says, "He was right." "He also said a promise is a kind of water," she says. "It keeps you alive from the inside when the outside is mean." "Bell will help us," he says. They cut east across Hardpan, slip into a thin run of mesquite to save the horses' feet, and at a cupped stone the animals drink while Eliza lowers herself slow, breath sharp, eyes fixed on a point that is not here. "Teach me," she says. "Teach you what?" he says. "To shoot, so I do not freeze," she says. He checks the sky and the ridge and the shimmer that might be heat or news, then nods. He places a flat stone on a limb at 15 paces, shows her grip and stance and how to share the recoil with her body, how to breathe before and after so the shot is the second between lungs. She misses left, clips wood, then kisses the stone, flinches and stops flinching. "Again," she says. "Again," he says. By the 5th round, she can stand inside the blast without running, and gives him a quick, uneven smile, like a spark jumping a gap. "We should move," he says. "Cartridges are a kind of breath too." The sun climbs and lays weight on their shoulders. A thin ridge of cloud builds lean to the west. They keep low, leaving little silhouette for eyes that hunt by habit, and by mid-afternoon the first windrights of the bend rise ahead, veins stilled to save wear, and beyond them the pale ribbon of cottonwoods stitched to the earth. "He is there," she says, more hope than question. "If he is," Rhett says, "he will make the rest of this make sense on paper." A shot cracks from the right ridge, and the spare bay shies with a groove along its flank where the lead kissed light. "Down," Rhett says. They pull the horses into scant cover of a wash, and dirt jumps in little hands as a second shot kicks wide and a third bites rock and whines. "4 men," Eliza whispers, counting shadows. "5," Rhett says, hearing the 5th breathe wrong. He points to a narrow cut no taller than a wagon. "If we take it, we can slide around and drop near the trees," he says. "They will flank us," she says. "Not if they think I hold you here," he says. "Do you trust me?" he says. "I married you before I knew your voice," she says. "That is either trust or madness, and I do not have time to choose." "Crawl the cut," he says. "Move when I fire. Do not stop. Do not look back." "I do not freeze," she says, and taps the revolver as if reminding her hand it belongs. He sends a shot right to hold heads down, another left to make the line hesitate. "Go," he says. She goes belly to dust, knees and palms and grit in her teeth, moving like someone who has learned the ground can be enemy and friend, and 3 barrels flash on the lip and stone spits near her boots, and Rhett answers to the middle sound and is paid with a curse and a thump. He slides after her lower than pride and fast as fear. The wash turns, shade leans in, and the ridge guns thin into distance. 200 yards and the cut opens into a bowl fringed with cottonwoods. Water breathes mud and leaf, and a hawk right slow circles high. He stands and scans and sees no movement at ground level, only the bend waiting like a door. "That is far enough," a voice says from the trees. Rhett wheels and raises the rifle, and the voice says, "Easy, son, or you will put a hole in the only man who can make this worth the paper." And a figure steps out with a book under one arm and a beard gone more white than gray and a hat pulled low, and Rhett lowers the barrel because years fall away. Reverend Amos Bell sets the book on a rock and opens his hands. "You brought trouble," he says, "and mercy too, and both can be sanctified if we are still standing when the sun drops." "Reverend," Eliza says, and the word lands like water. Bell nods as if he already met her in thought and was only waiting for the body to arrive. "We have men behind us and papers with us," Rhett says, "and if we can make one answer the other before more guns show, we might keep her name whole." "Then let us not waste the light," Bell says. "Put your hands where they can be seen and your words where they can be heard, and let us bind what the greedy fear most, which is 2 people who decide to stand together." Bell leads them under the cottonwoods where the ground is soft and the light falls in broken coins. He opens the book, lays a palm across the page as if steadying a nervous colt, and asks for names and intent. "Rhett," he says. "Eliza," she says. Bell says the law likes order, witness, and signatures that match the bones of a thing, and he will give them that, but he also says vows are older than paper and stand longer than ink. "Set your feet," he says. "Breathe. Remember why you stood when it was easier to kneel." Rhett feels an old weight shift, the kind men carry when they have lost and still choose. Eliza feels heat in her side that is not fear. Bell glances at the sky and says, "We have an hour." "Rings?" he asks. "None," Rhett says. "Hands will do," Bell says. "Witness?" he asks, lifting his own hand, then adds, "God will count as 2. Across the bowl, the river speaks low. Somewhere higher, A rider curses the steep, and the sound frays and fades. Bell closes the book. When your breath is quiet, he says, we begin. Then he waits, because a good man knows when to let silence work. The morning over Cottonwood Bend came as a thin red hush, and the cottonwoods barely moved, their pale undersides flicking like fish in low water. Rhett Callahan sat with his back to the mission wall, running a whetstone along his knife just to keep his hands from asking questions. Eliza Hale watched ash settle in the fire ring until it looked like a map of places she could not go back to. She folded her father's letter and said in a voice steadier than the night before, "You deserve the whole of it." Rhett nodded once because a man does not drag truth into daylight with talk when it is ready to walk on its own. A summer rider with polished boots and a preacher's smile came to a valley where a well never ran dry. Samuel Hale tapped stone and chalked marks until an underground pattern rose like stitching under Texas. He told that rider no without raising his voice because decency should not have to shout. Vane smiled like a snake faking a yawn and said refusal was only a slower kind of yes. 2 months later, fire walked the fences and black coats watched from the dark like mourners at a funeral they had planned. On the third night, smoke turned the stars black, and Samuel pressed a sealed letter into Eliza's hand and said, "Run." She ran until barbed wire tore her hip and kept running because pain gets small when fear fills the field. At the gate she looked back and saw Vane lit by his own fire, and he called, "You will come back. The law is mine." By morning the sheriff called it an accident. A clerk moved the boundary line as if grief owned a straight edge. Vane's men came with stakes and a new survey that pretended not to know the old one. The water under the valley ran north to south like a captured prayer. Vane meant to catch it in iron and sell it by the gallon to the rail yards. Rhett listened without blinking and said, quiet as a confession, "I told Vane no once." After the war, he rode 3 hungry months for the man because money felt like medicine. Then Vane hanged a boy for touching his own bridle, and Rhett cut himself loose and went small so guilt would echo less. "Small keeps you alive," Eliza said, "but it keeps your soul in a smaller room." He did not argue. The wind shifted and brought the cold smell of a place that burned too clean. By noon they followed the dry creek that once fed Hale cotton. The land opened into long red plates and thorn and ribs of charred posts. When she pointed at a low rise, Rhett knew grief was waiting there. The house had been given back to son. The foundation was blistered, and the well throat was choked with soot. A windmill vane ticked like a stubborn clock. Eliza swung down and walked the ash with the care of reading a grave. "Kitchen here," she said. "Map's there." Her gaze caught a small door sunk half into dirt. Rhett levered it up and cooled smoke rose like old breath. They climbed into the root cellar where dust lay heavy as a kept secret. He struck a match and it flared the way hope does when air is stingy. A rust-scabbed cash box sat wedged behind a brace. He pried it open with the knife, and inside the oilcloth sweated the smell of ink and fear. Eliza spread a page on her knee. "Flow grid. West Vane," she murmured. She pointed to dates that argued with the new boundary and to a signature that tried to look clean. Lyle Hart, Deputy Registrar. "I've seen that mark south of Dawson," Rhett said. He slid the page inside his vest where Bell's book made a second spine and let the match die. When they climbed out, the heat found them again. Eliza stood with the wind blowing her hair away from her face. He burned the proof and forgot what ash can hide. "Now the ground speaks for you," Rhett said, and rested a hand on her shoulder. They walked the perimeter one last time, and he found the pump handle twisted by heat and handed it to her. She weighed it like a relic that could anchor or drown a memory. "Father said water remembers kindness and neglect," she said. "Land remembers blood," he answered. She nodded and let tears fall where dust erased them as they landed. Then she scrubbed her face with the heel of her hand. We ride to Dawson with the papers, with what I saw, with your name on our side. Sevens. We ride with Reverend Bell's last minutes in our pocket, he said. We make them count. They left the ruin at dusk with coyotes threading their shadows. The west went copper and then iron. Night rose from the ground instead of falling from the sky. They halted in a mesquite draw, and Rhett made a small fire no higher than a saddle horn. Eliza stitched the oilcloth into her saddlebag lining. Over coffee cut with river water, he said, "Tell me the rest so I don't sleep with guesswork." She told him the sheriff's speech that fit too well in the wrong mouth, and how Vane stood behind him like a consoling uncle. A new surveyor staked a fresh edge with paint still wet. The church doors opened to Reverend Bell, who seemed already waiting, as if he had heard flames from miles away. Bell spoke of a proxy marriage that could raise a wall when men only understood property. He wrote to a soldier with a reputation for stubborn honesty and asked if the name Callahan still meant what it used to. Months later, when Blackcoats came to the well, she ran east with a letter and a name. She ended at a fence where a stranger kept cattle and a windmill cut slow circles against a hot sky. "That line," she said, nodding at the coals, "ends at your yard." Sevens. Rhett felt the weight of it settle like something he had been holding without knowing. "I thought I took you in out of obligation," he said. "But the ground under both our feet asked me to stand. They let quiet do the talking because quiet is the desert's fluent tongue." Rhett spoke of a winter by the Brazos when living cost another man his breath. The choice followed him like a small dog that never barks but waits by the door. "Being small never made the echo fade," he said. "Then make yourself the size of the truth," she answered. He almost smiled. "I married a preacher. You married a witness who is done being quiet." A coyote laughed wrong. The fire burned to red coins. They spoke of the steps ahead and drew a clean order over the ash. A smith named Ezra could make iron listen and owed Rhett a bottle. A saloon called the Four Aces sheltered Lyle Hart when he drank and signed too smooth. A ledger lay under a painted floor. They planned how to catch a man like that without turning meaner than him. By the time the coals dulled, she had folded pain into a shape that could travel. He had put guilt where it could not hold the reins. They slept back to back, so each could watch one half of the world if they woke. Before dawn, a cold wind ran the draw and made the mesquite clack like counting sticks. Rhett woke to that tally and to the soft scrape of Eliza tying the stitched saddlebag under her leg where no thief could cut it free. "We ride," she said. "We ride," he answered. The east cracked a thin line of red across the clay. Two figures moved out, small against the blood-colored earth that had taken much and would take more if asked. The river ran on their right, and low hills stretched like sleeping cattle to their left. As light grew, she slowed at a ridge where an old fence had given up even the memory of wire. "There," she said. The cut where he stood and smiled while the house burned. Sevens. Rhett saw only rock and wind, a place that would not confess without help. Then we dragged the confession out by its boots. She almost smiled, but the day needed both eyes. They took the creek bed north, so their dust rode low. They talked about how a story becomes a weapon only when the right ears hear it. "You're more than someone I'm bound to protect," he said. "You're the voice he can't buy." Sevens. "Then be the wall I lean on when it's my turn to speak," she said. That was promise enough for a morning. By noon, the red plates cracked under the horses with the sound of crockery. The air pulled water from a mouth faster than a man could put it back. They passed a windmill pocked by target practice until each blade was a ragged tooth. He hires men who treat the world the way they treat metal, Eliza said. Then we teach metal to talk back, Rhett replied. He told her again of Ezra and the art of welding truth into a bolt. Find him first, she said. Then the clerk. Then the book. You remember like a soldier, he said. I am finished forgetting like a girl, she answered. Far ahead, a freight engine spoke a low complaint that reached them late. She sat taller because that sound proved the corridor did not end at fire. It ended at money. When the sun leaned, they watered at a thin seep that tasted like coins. Night will make Dawson look kinder than it is, Rhett warned. Don't believe it. Sevens. I'll believe only what we can carry out, she said. They did not camp where a flame could mark them. They lay in the lee of a bank and pulled coats over their heads while the sky kept watch. You're the hinge, Eliza, Rhett said into wool. The place where this turns. Then hold the door while I speak, she said, and the wind eased as if even the desert had come to listen. Before sleep, Rhett knew his duty had changed. He was no longer only shielding her from harm. He was standing with the one witness who could pull Vane down by the roots and make the red earth remember another kind of name. The noon sun burned the tin roofs of Goodnight until they looked like they were ready to melt, and the only sound was the slow grind of the windmill behind the livery where Rhett Callahan was tying off his mare. He had promised Eliza the stop would be quick, just cartridges, flour, and wire, but the kind of luck that follows desperate people had found them again. Down the empty road, dust lifted like a curtain, and out of that heat shimmer came 9 riders in black coats that caught no light. Rhett felt it in his teeth before he saw them. Eliza stepped from the general store, her hand on the saddlebag that hid the oilcloth papers, her face drawn and pale but steady. The street froze the way small towns do when trouble comes wearing spurs. A child was pulled from a window, a dog went silent, and the air turned to glass. The man in front wore a silver concho on his hatband, bright as a coin flipping through the sun. He slowed his horse to a proud crawl and said, "Morning, folks. We are looking for a runaway wife," his smile showing white teeth that had never spoken truth. Nobody answered. Rhett stayed still beside the trough, one hand on the rifle, eyes calm as a storm about to pick its shape. The rider went on, voice smooth as oil on a wound. She has dark hair, a little scar by her lip, travels with a man too old to be a lover, but too stubborn to be a friend. Eliza's throat moved once, and before Rhett could speak, she took one step forward and said, "My name is Eliza Hale, and I belong to no man." The concho rider's grin deepened. "There you are, Mrs. Hale." "I prefer Mrs. Vane." Rolls cleaner on the tongue. Rhett's voice was low enough to make the words heavy. "You made a long ride for a mistake." The man chuckled. "Vane doesn't make mistakes. The girl carries a document that names her husband and half this valley. We'll take both." Rhett shifted the rifle up just enough that the sun flashed on the barrel. "You cross my dirt, you pay for it." A younger rider to the left barked a laugh, drew his gun halfway. Eliza whispered, "Don't," but the boy didn't hear her. Rhett fired once, clean through his wrist, and the pistol hit dust. The report cracked across the town like thunder that forgot its manners. For a moment, Goodnight held its breath. Then everything moved at once. Doors slammed, a bottle shattered, somebody screamed, and a horse reared against the hitch rail. The concho man's grin broke. "Poor purchase, Callahan. The price just went up." He raised his gloved hand, and the others began to fan out, boots scraping dirt, black coats flaring like wings. Rhett stepped into the street. "She stays with me. She's property, and property returns to its ledger," the man said. "Then this is where the ledger ends." He didn't wait for another word. The windmill groaned, The dust lifted, and the two lines met in the middle of Main Street with the kind of sound that stays in wood forever. Eliza ducked behind the feed store, revolver drawn the way Rhett had taught her, and the first bullet hissed past her hair. Rhett fired from the open, calm, quick, each pull of the trigger a heartbeat. The Concho man turned his horse toward her, shouting over the gunfire, "You run now, Mrs. Hale, and maybe he lives." But Eliza did not run. She rose from cover and shot the man's hat clean off his head. The bullet took a piece of the brim and his pride with it. Rhett barked once, "Down!" and the next shot shattered the water trough beside him, splashing both with mud and light. The fight was a blur of sound, iron, dust, hooves, the sharp cry of bullets against walls. Through it all, Rhett moved closer to Eliza, step by step, as the riders spread like wolves trying to circle. "Back to the horses," he said. She nodded, face pale but unflinching. The air burned with gun smoke and sun. Somewhere behind them, the church bell rang once, lonely as warning. The riders closed in again, confident, shouting her name like a prize. Rhett looked at her and said, "Stay behind me." She shook her head. Not anymore. The next moment was noise, heat, and motion, the part of the story Goodnight would never forget. The street of Goodnight turned into a furnace, every shadow alive with motion, every window a witness that wished to forget. The riders scattered down both sides, firing wild to flush them out, but Rhett Callahan had already moved, pulling Eliza by the arm into the narrow cut between the feed store and the blacksmith's shed. The air there smelled of hot iron and blood. "They'll split and box us," he said, loading fast. "Then we don't let them," she answered, voice trembling but eyes steady. A bullet chewed the edge of the barrel beside them. Rhett leaned out, fired once, and a black coat spun off his horse and fell against a water trough, his boots scraping the dust until they stopped moving. From the far end of town came the sound of more hooves, reinforcements or scavengers. It didn't matter. Eliza's revolver shook in her hands. Rhett turned, pressing her wrist down gently. "Slow your breath. Make each shot count." She nodded, jaw tight. He saw the fear in her, and the fight, and something else too. Faith. The wind shifted, carrying the taste of smoke. Somewhere, the livery was burning. "They'll smoke us out," she said. "They'll try." Rhett peered toward the saloon where the Concho rider had taken cover. His hat was gone, his pride with it, but his voice still cut through the din. "Callahan. Give her up and live long enough to regret it." Rhett muttered, "I'm not in the habit of regrets." He moved down the alley, staying low, counting shots. 6 left in the rifle, 2 in his belt, 1 in his boot. Eliza followed close, every breath catching against the gunfire. "When I say run," he told her, "you ride. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you. You will if you want to live." Another bullet sparked against the anvil. Rhett turned, fired again, the recoil hard against his shoulder, and the man behind the saloon door fell without a sound. Eliza stepped forward, covering his flank. "They're circling left," she shouted. Rhett reloaded in motion, each movement precise, practiced. He had fought men before, drifters, raiders, outlaws, but never for something that felt like a promise. "We need to reach the horses," he said. "Marshal's office is across the square," Eliza answered. "If anyone can stop them, then that's where we go." They cut through the alley and came out behind the post office. Sunlight hit them like a blow. Across the street, the Concho man spotted them, his gun already raised. "Mrs. Hale," he shouted. "Vane sends his regards." Rhett pushed her down as the shot came. The bullet tore through the signboard above them. He fired back, the shot striking the man's shoulder. The Concho rider dropped his weapon, still upright, swaying in the saddle. "You're a dead man, Callahan," he hissed. Rhett answered, "Get in line." Then came another sound, the harsh crack of a rifle that didn't belong to either of them. The bullet split dust in front of the Concho's horse, and a voice thundered over the chaos. "Enough." Marshal Denton stood in the middle of the street, coat flapping, badge gleaming, shotgun braced against his hip. He looked like a storm had decided to wear a man's shape. "You boys got names?" He barked. Silence, except for the groan of one wounded rider. Denton's next shot hit the dirt by the Concho man's boot. "Names!" he shouted again. The riders wavered. Some began to back their horses away. Rhett grabbed Eliza's hand. "Now." They sprinted toward the livery, bullets chasing them like angry bees. Denton covered their retreat with 2 more thunderous shots, each one buying another heartbeat. Rhett saddled fast, his hands sure even as dust rained from the rafters. "Mount up," he said. Eliza swung into the saddle, gripping the reins, hair tangled in the wind. "What about Denton?" "He can handle himself." The marshal fired one last time, voice echoing through the square. "You tell your boss this town remembers names." As Rhett and Eliza broke from the alley into the open fields, the last thing they saw was Denton reloading in the sunlight, steady as judgment itself. The town fell behind them, smoke curling upward like a prayer no one dared to say aloud. The fields behind Goodnight rolled out in hard sun and red dust, and Rhett and Eliza drove the horses down the dry wash while the last shouts from town thinned into wind. And when Rhett glanced back, he saw a faint smear of smoke and said, "We bought a little time," and Eliza answered, "He will send more," and he said, "Then we make him pay for each one." And they followed the wash until it bent toward a spine of red rock and cottonwood, where the land looked carved by fire and rain, both, and the papers in her saddlebag felt heavier with every mile, and at a shallow pool they let the horses drink while the wind fussed the willow leaves, and Rhett said, "Catch your breath," and Eliza knelt, her reflection wavering, and she said, "My father taught me to shoot cans off a fence when I was 10, and said I would need it, and Rhett said he was right, and she said, 'You shoot like a man who does not expect mercy,' and he said, 'Mercy is what you earn after smoke clears.'" And the quiet held a moment before she whispered, "When the fire took Hale Valley, I thought the world ended, and seeing them today felt like it began again." And he said, "The world keeps ending until someone stands their ground," and she said, "You stood for me," and he said, "You gave me reason." Then he rose and said, "We ride to Dawson and put these papers where they cut deepest," and she asked, "Do you trust Denton?" And he said, "Enough to wager breath." And they mounted and took the ridge as the sun slid lower and thunder of hooves murmured far off. And Eliza said, "They are coming," and Rhett turned into a dry arroyo and said, "This way," and bullets hissed overhead and stones stung their faces, and he fired twice to slow the cresting riders, while Eliza crouched low, and a black coat slid his horse wrong and tumbled into the wash with a scream, and Rhett called, "Keep moving," and they burst out the far end into open ground, rinsed with the last heat of day, and silence finally held. And Eliza let out a breath and said, "We made it," and Rhett said, "For now, and that will do." And they rode to a stand of cottonwoods where shade pooled, and he spread a small map over his knee and said, "Fort Dawson lies 2 days east if the trails are honest, and ghosts like to loiter between." And she asked, "Will the marshal wait?" And he said, "He will, because stubborn men do." And the last light found her dust freckled and steady, and he said, "You fought well." And she said, "So did you." And he said, "You were supposed to run." And she said, "I chose to stay." And for a beat, nothing moved but horsetails and leaves, and she whispered, "He called me Mrs. Vane," and Rhett said, "He will choke on it before this is done." Then he brushed dirt from her sleeve and said, "We finish it together," and she met his gaze and said, "Then let us make it count." And the first stars pricked through the copper sky, while Goodnight smoldered behind them like a wound that would not close, and the road to Dawson opened ahead, hard and straight, with justice waiting somewhere in the dark like a fire they intended to light. The stars were still fading when Rhett Callahan and Eliza Hale rode into the basin east of Goodnight, the air cool and gray, the dust from last night's chase long since buried under dew. They followed a dry creek bed that twisted toward a ridge of red stone where Reverend Amos Bell kept his small mission. Rhett had known the place years ago when the war still taught men to pray only after shooting stopped. Now it looked like the rest of the West, half rebuilt, half burned, and waiting for a reason to hope. Smoke from a cooking fire marked the roofline. Rhett reined in, hand resting near his holster. "He won't open the door quick," he said. "He never does." Eliza nodded. "Maybe that's why he's still alive." They dismounted, the horses blowing hard, and walked the last few yards. Bell's door creaked open before Rhett could knock. The old preacher filled the frame, tall and raw-boned, his white hair tangled with wind. "If you're bringing the law, I've already confessed," he said dryly. Then he saw Rhett's face and the woman beside him. "By God's mercy, you picked a strange time to come courting." Rhett smiled, small and tired. "Good to see you too, Reverend." Bell's eyes softened. "Inside, both of you, before someone sees." The cabin smelled of pine smoke, coffee, and paper. Shelves of worn Bibles lined the wall, next to a rifle that had been cleaned too often to be retired. Eliza sat carefully at the table, setting the saddlebag in front of her. "We have something you need to read," she said. Bell glanced at Rhett, then untied the bag and drew out the folded papers. He studied the seal, tracing the wax with his thumb. "Lyle Hart's hand," he murmured. "And a forged one at that. The devil's clerk himself." He looked up. "Vane's corridor scheme again. I thought that died with the war." "It didn't," Rhett said. "He burned her father out of Hale Valley to cover the theft. We've got proof he's been buying water rights under false names." Bell's mouth tightened. "And the girl?" Eliza met his gaze without flinching. "I'm what's left of the Hale name." The old man sighed, rubbing his temple. "Then he'll come for you until the earth runs out of places to hide." Rhett leaned forward. "That's why we need your help. Denton said you'd know how to make this official." "Denton's a fool and a brave one," Bell muttered, scanning the page again. "He's right about one thing. That proxy marriage paper won't hold in court. It's a shadow, legal enough to wave at the gallows, not enough to stand before a judge." Eliza frowned. "Then what do we do?" Bell's eyes lifted, sharp as a hawk's. "You marry again. Properly. In name, in record, under witnesses. That way, if Vane drags you before the county, he'll find a lawful wife standing with a lawful husband and a claim backed by this mission's seal." Rhett blinked. "You're saying the only way to fight him is to make this marriage real." "Exactly," Bell said. "The law respects ink and courage, not ghosts." Eliza looked down at her hands, the faint scar along her knuckle pale against the lamplight. "This wasn't how I thought it would happen." "It never is," Bell said softly. "But the right vows can turn fear into ground you can stand on." Rhett met her eyes. "If we do this, it's not for show." "I know. And if we don't, he wins." The silence that followed was short but full. Bell rose, joints cracking, and reached for a ledger bound in cracked leather. "Then we waste no daylight. I'll fetch 2 witnesses from the settlement road. You 2 rest, eat something. There'll be a ceremony by moonrise." Eliza stood as he moved toward the door. "Reverend," she said quietly, "thank you." He looked back once, his face a mixture of weariness and faith. "Child, I buried enough good men in this valley. If this makes one less grave, that's thanks enough. When he was gone, Rhett poured 2 cups of cold coffee, handed one to her. You still want this? She met his gaze squarely. I want my name back. He nodded. Then we start with yours and mine, both written where no man can erase them. Outside, the morning wind rose, carrying the smell of sage and faraway smoke. Somewhere out on the plain, riders would already be tracing their trail, but for the first time since the night she stumbled bleeding through his fence, Eliza Hale felt steady. The day ahead belonged to their choosing. Night laid itself gently over the mission, thick with the hum of crickets and the faint whisper of cottonwood leaves. Reverend Bell hung 2 lanterns from the lowest branches, their light soft and golden against the silver blue of the creek. The table he'd dragged outside served as an altar, its surface marked with knife scratches and candle burns from weddings and funerals long past. Rhett Callahan stood beside it, cleaned up as best a man could after days of running. His collar was open, his sleeves rolled, the revolver still tied low on his hip, a reminder that vows in this country were spoken under watch of gunfire as much as grace. Eliza stepped from the doorway, wearing a simple muslin dress that Bell's late wife had once kept folded for Sundays. It was a little loose at the waist, short at the ankle, but when the wind touched it, it looked made for her. She carried no bouquet, only the folded paper that once claimed her as a wife on proxy. When she reached the altar, she laid that paper on the wood like setting down a ghost. Bell smiled, the kind of smile that held sorrow but also pride. You'll have your witnesses, he said, motioning toward the 2 who had come from the road. A freighter named Cal, his hat in his hands, and Marin, the widowed seamstress from the next county. They nodded quietly. Bell's voice rose steady in the cool air. Marriage isn't a shield, he said. It's a promise to stand when standing costs something. He looked from Rhett to Eliza. Do you understand? Rhett nodded once. I do. Eliza hesitated, eyes shimmering under lantern light. I do. Bell opened his small Bible, pages thin as breath. Then speak after me. I take you, before God and this earth, to walk beside me through all that remains. Rhett repeated the words, his voice low and rough. Eliza echoed them, her tone clear, steadying as it went. Bell reached for a bit of copper wire stripped from a spool near the wall and twisted it into 2 thin rings. The gold comes later, he said, smiling. But the meaning's the same. He slipped one onto Rhett's hand, one onto hers. The metal was cool at first, then warm as their fingers brushed. He signed the ledger, pressing the mission seal deep into wax, and said, By law of this county and the mercy of heaven, I name you husband and wife. Silence followed, real silence, the kind that breathes. Eliza drew a long breath, let it out in a shiver. So it's done, she whispered. Rhett looked at her, something in his eyes softer than the firelight. No more pretending. No more hiding. A horse shifted in the dark beyond the creek, snorting once before quiet returned. Bell closed his book. You'll ride east by dawn, he said. The world won't wait long to test your promise. Rhett offered his hand, and Eliza took it without hesitation. Together they stepped from the altar, side by side under the lanterns. The copper glinted faintly on their fingers, the vows still fresh in the air, the road to Dawson waiting beyond the black horizon. Dawn came slow and red through the cottonwoods, the light spilling over the creek like watered blood. The night had held no dreams, only the sound of wind tugging the shutters and the weight of what they'd chosen. Reverend Bell was already awake, sitting by the hearth with his coat on and his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold. The ledger lay open beside him, their names drying in fresh ink. Rhett Callahan stepped quietly into the room, his boots soft on the plank floor. You mean to ride out now? Belle said without looking up. Rhett nodded. The longer we stay, the easier we are to find. And the louder this place becomes a target, Belle replied. He closed the ledger, binding it with a strip of twine. The county clerk at Dawson, Merritt Lane, is an honest man if you reach him before the bribes do. Give him this. He pulled a small packet from his coat. The signed license, witness affidavits, and a letter bearing Belle's seal. These will stand before any judge in Texas. Guard them better than your gun. Rhett took the bundle, tucked it inside his coat. We'll deliver it. Then the law will have to listen. Belle stood, bones creaking like the timbers of an old ship. Ride for the Freeman Forge before noon. Ezra's place is safe ground. He'll fix what needs fixing, and he owes me enough favors to count for prayer. Eliza appeared at the door, her hair braided, her new copper ring catching the light. We will. Belle studied her for a moment. You look less afraid than you should. Maybe I'm tired of fear, she said simply. He smiled faintly. Then you'll do fine. Outside, the world was washed clean by the early sun. Their horses stamped impatiently, breath steaming in the chill. Rhett tightened the girth and checked the saddlebag twice, feeling the rustle of the papers beneath the flap. Eliza swung up behind him, eyes scanning the horizon. The wind carried the smell of smoke, not from the mission, but from somewhere farther west. Belle watched them from the porch. He'll send scouts before the week's done, he warned. Rhett nodded. Then we'd better be ghosts before they come looking. Belle stepped down, placed a hand on Rhett's shoulder. Ghosts don't build a better world, son. Men do. Bring these papers to Dawson, and make them mean something. Rhett looked him in the eye. I'll see it done. Belle turned to Eliza. And you, don't let the world tell you who you are again. She smiled, small and fierce. It already tried. With that, they mounted and turned toward the ridge. The mission shrank behind them, a square of light in the waking land. By mid-morning, they reached the open plain, heat rising off the earth like breath. The trail east cut through stretches of mesquite and stone, each mile stitched with dust and silence. Rhett rode with his hat low, every sense tuned for sound. Once or twice he thought he heard hooves in the distance, but the wind swallowed them. Around noon they came to a bluff overlooking a dry gully. Below, the ruins of an old campfire still smoked faintly. They're close, Eliza murmured. Closer than comfort, Rhett said. He slid from the saddle, crouched beside the ashes, and found a horseshoe print deep and sharp. Scouts! How many? 3, maybe 4. He rose, scanning the horizon. We'll move through the rocks, keep the creek bed between us and them. They pressed on, weaving through the canyon's low bends until the air grew still and hot. Somewhere a hawk screamed. The sound of a rifle bolt cut the silence. Rhett shoved Eliza behind a boulder just as a bullet ripped through the dust beside them. He fired back, hitting stone near a rider's chest and forcing him off balance. Another shot came, grazing Rhett's sleeve. They found us, Eliza said through clenched teeth. They always do, Rhett answered. But they don't keep us. He took aim again, dropped one of the scout's horses, and motioned for her to mount. Go. She hesitated. What about go? She spurred forward, her horse leaping across the wash. Rhett followed, bullets chasing them through the ravine until the noise faded behind. They didn't slow until the sound was gone completely, leaving only the heartbeat of hooves and the rasp of wind. When they finally stopped, the world was quiet again. Eliza turned to him, chest heaving. They'll tell Vane we're alive. Rhett smiled grimly. Good. Let him lose sleep over it. He looked down at the papers pressed tight against his coat. We're almost there. To Dawson? To Proof. She reached out, brushing the dust from his arm. And after Proof? After that, he said, we see what's left to save. She nodded, her eyes shining with something that wasn't just exhaustion. Behind them, the horizon burned orange, and the mission's lanterns were already too far to see. Ahead, the east road shimmered with heat and promise. They rode toward it side by side, husband and wife by law and by will, two small figures moving through the wide red silence toward whatever justice still waited to be found. Mist lay low over the flats when Rhett Callahan and Eliza Hale reached Ezra Freeman's forge, the chimney breathing a thin stripe of smoke, while a hammer found the heart of iron and the anvil waited like an altar in sparks. Rhett swung down slow. Eliza slid from the saddle with one hand on the stitched bag that held their proof, and a broad-shouldered figure filled the doorway, dark as iron and bright-eyed like banked coals when wind finds them. Ezra grinned through hard years and said, "You still make morning answer to my hammer," and Rhett said, "Only thing that listens regular," and they pulled each other into a rough embrace before Ezra's gaze cut to Eliza. "So the Hale girl stands on her own feet." She nodded. "We came to make the law louder than their guns. Then we start with steel." Inside, heat breathed from the fire and painted the walls the color of old blood. Ezra laid Rhett's rifle on the bench, thumbed the action, and frowned like a man reading a lie. "You've been asking this barrel to sing in the wrong key. She still hits her notes, not when the wind argues." He stripped the rifle with the ease of prayer, swapped a tired spring, lapped the bore, checked the crown with a thumbnail, then set a trued cylinder beside it. "Tighter fit," he said. "Kick's honest. Shoot straighter than the men chasing you." Eliza set the saddlebag down, palm on the flap. "You trust leather, not rooms," Ezra said. "Good. Rooms can be bought. Stitch knows your name." Rhett told him, "We need a hide sewn into her saddle big enough to swallow a ledger and affidavits," and Ezra was already at the awl and waxed thread, cutting a slit clean as a promise, sliding a thin copper plate to stiffen the pocket. "Denton sent word," he said while his hands worked. "Names slither east." Lyle Hart wore a new suit at the Four Aces and bought drinks with lies. "Then he is paid to lie again," Eliza said, and Ezra answered, "Make truth heavier." Racks of tongs and swages lined the wall, horseshoes bright from quench, the forge mouth orange and breathing. "Friends and ghosts use my back door," Ezra said. "Which are you today?" "Alive will do," Rhett answered, and Ezra's laugh was short and warm as he tugged the saddle close and tapped the new seam. "Proof sleeps here and wakes when you call it." He set a target board against the fence and jerked his chin yardward. "Teach her while I give your luck a hinge." Outside, the cottonwoods whispered and the sky tried to see too much. Rhett loaded 3 rounds and passed the revolver butt first. "Feet under you, shoulders kind. Let the gun rest where your breath lives." Eliza lifted the weight, the small scar at her lip pale as dust, and the first shot cracked the quiet into daylight and skinned the post high. "Again," he said. The second dug dust at the base. She gathered silence behind her teeth and pressed the third. Wood jumped with a clean slap, and her laugh came ragged and bright. "I thought I would always be the person who runs. You are the person who decides." Ezra brought a small iron clamp lined in leather. "Document keeper," he said. "Strap it under your cantle. If they take the saddle, they still miss the proof." Their fingers met a breath longer than tools require. "You owe me a bottle and a song. I will bring both when this is over." Wind shifted, carrying a far, thin clink that did not belong to Ezra's shop. "Riders," Eliza said. "Breakfast for sinners," Ezra answered. "Not yet their hour. Finish what you must." Rhett checked buckles and rounds. Eliza reloaded with steadier hands than fear allowed yesterday. "No more hiding behind me," he said. "I am done being a shadow," she answered, and the forge breathed heat like a promise that knew their names. The yard behind the forge was a strip of hard earth and 3 fence posts chewed by old bullets, and a broken wheel leaned like a halo missing pieces, while cottonwoods whispered the kind of warnings people ignore until they don't. And Eliza Hale set her boots shoulder-width as Rhett Callahan stood beside her close enough for his voice to reach without touching her hands. "Breathe easy," he said. "Let the sight come back on its own. Don't chase it." She drew air slow and steady, and the first shot snapped high and spat a splinter from the post, and she flinched and said, "Miss," and he said, "Lesson moving fast." Again, and the second dug dust at the base, and the third slapped wood clean, so she laughed once short and bright and then blinked hard like a person who had surprised herself. Ezra Freeman watched from the door, a length of steel glowing in his tongs, and said, "You hold like a fighter already," and Eliza answered, "I am tired of being a fugitive," and he grinned. Sparks fell like small stars as he set the steel to the anvil and shaped it with a rhythm that calmed the air, and Rhett guided her stance by words alone. "Hips under your bones. Elbows easy. Let the gun rest where your breath lives." She shot again and found center twice, and her hands shook afterward, not from fear, but from the shock of seeing the world answer her. "I thought I would always run," she said. "You choose now," Rhett said. Ezra came out with a leather wrap and laid a short carbine on the bench, the crown fresh, the action tight. "Feed this decent loads, and she will tell the truth," he said. He slid the saddle closer and pressed on the new seam where the hidden pocket slept. This holds what matters when men search for weight with greedy fingers. Put nails in the other bag. A stone in the bedroll. Lie to the hands that pat what they do not own. Rhett nodded and drew a quick map on the dust with his boot. "We ride the south trail to the wash, cut east at the dead field, then keep low to Dawson." Ezra's face sobered. "Black coats on the north draw at dawn, 3 for sure. Maybe 5. They like to eat before they sin." A thin clink of iron reached them on the wind that did not belong to the forge, and all 3 lifted their heads at once. "Time," Ezra said. "Not yet," Rhett answered. He turned to Eliza. 5 more rounds and we are done." She raised the revolver, found the sight, pressed, and the board thumped true, and when she holstered the gun, the motion was stiff, but hers. Ezra passed Rhett a pouch of cartridges and a small iron clamp lined in leather. "Strap this under the cantle," he said. "If they steal the saddle, the papers still ride with you." Rhett buckled it in place and looked to the road that ran thin as hope. "If we don't return," Eliza began, and Ezra lifted a hand. "You will. Make the law listen. I will make steel sing until you are gone." The wind shifted again, bringing the dry taste of far horses, and Rhett said, "We leave at moonrise," and Eliza answered, "Then teach me one last thing," and he said, "What?" And she said, "How to stand when fear remembers my name," and he told her, "You stand anyway," and for a breath the yard felt as steady as an anvil before the next strike. Moon rose silver through the cottonwoods when Rhett Callahan and Eliza Hale led the horses from Ezra Freeman's forge, the coals breathing behind him like a loyal dog as he pressed a bundle into Rhett's hands and said, "For the road that forgets friends," and inside lay the tight-tuned carbine, a reworked revolver, a pouch of clean cartridges, and 2 small copper tags punched with initials and a cross. Eliza checked the saddlebag twice, the hidden clamp under the cantle once more, then touched the thin copper ring on her finger as if to remind the night that vows travel faster than fear. Ezra pointed toward the willow seam of the South Wash. "North Gate is watched. Keep to water. When it narrows, cut east to the dead field." Rhett gripped his forearm. "If we don't return," and Ezra cut him off with a tired smile. Then write my name on the bottle you owe. A clink of iron drifted from the ridge where no forge lived, and a low voice laughed wrong. So Eliza said, "They are early," and Ezra answered, "Go." They went. The horses slid into the wash, water whispering around fetlocks while Willow combed the moon into bars across leather and skin, and behind them a wide shot cracked the dark. The kind men fire to say the hunt has begun. "Left bank where the grass holds clay," Rhett said, and Eliza heeled the bay into the darker track without wasting breath. The wash tightened, then spilled them onto flats pale as ash, and 3 riders broke from the north shadow to pen them, and Rhett let the carbine speak once so the left horse folded neat, and its owner hit dust, and the other 2 pressed because some men learn only in threes. Eliza drew, breathed the way she had practiced, waited for the sight to come home, and pressed. A hat leapt, and the same bullet took a shoulder, and the rider fell back cursing like a man praying to whiskey. "Go!" Rhett said, and they bent the plane into a gray ribbon while the last rider clung to their quarter like a burr. The ground turned to packed clay and bullets hissed into the low bank, so Rhett holstered the carbine, drew the new revolver, found the man by the way his shadow moved against the moon, and shot a stirrup and most of his courage free, and the rider slid sideways and decided distance could do his fighting. They ran on until the wash met a bed of pale sand that swallowed hoofbeats and gifted a mile of silence. On a low rise they halted, and the world split into 2 clean truths. West, a faint red smear where the forge began to burn. East, a darker seam where the cut led toward Dawson like a wound wanting stitch. Eliza looked back once. He is firing the shop. Rhett's jaw set. He is choosing us. Smoke came thin and steady, and with it the knowledge that a friend had weighed years and tools and set them down so 2 names could ride lighter. "We keep moving," she said. "We do," he answered. They dropped through the dead cotton field, where stalks snapped under hoof like brittle ribs, and the moon made 1,000 pale crosses that asked for quiet. "Low ground until the oaks," Rhett said. Then the county road and the marshal's shadow. "If they find us," she asked, already steady. "Then the iron you learned will answer first." On the last ridge he checked the clamp under the cantle and felt the affidavits rustle where no thief would pat, and she tightened lashings with the calm of someone done asking permission from fear. Far behind, timbers sighed as a roof gave way, and a promise kept in flame spoke for a man who would not. "We will pay him back," she said. "With a world that doesn't require burning," he said, and turned east, and she matched him, husband and wife by law and will, 2 dark figures stitched to the land by bit and breath, riding toward a clerk with a decent spine and a marshal with a memory, while behind them the forge burned like a star hammered into the night to mark their passage and to warn the dark that steel and friendship had taken sides. The storm comes crawling out of the west before the sun is down, black and swollen, carrying the smell of wet dust and something like iron. Rhett and Eliza ride hard through the last stretch of mesquite until the trees open and the bend of the cottonwood appears, its pale trunks glowing in the gloom like bones of the earth. Reverend Bell's small chapel stands on higher ground, its bell tower crooked against the coming dark. Smoke still rises from cook fires, the people inside not yet knowing that trouble rides with the storm. Rhett reins in near the barn and says quietly, "We hold here. He'll come for you tonight." Eliza's hands tremble on the reins, but her voice doesn't. "Then let him come." The wind changes, cold and fast. They lead the horses under the shed and begin fortifying what they can, barrels rolled to the door, lanterns doused, rifles checked. Bell appears in the doorway with 2 boys and a rosary looped around his wrist. "I heard word from the trail," he says. "Vane's men cross the ridge before noon." Rhett nods. "That means they'll reach the river by dusk." He gestures to Eliza. "Take the women into the chapel. Pack water. Keep low when you hear the shots. She looks at him a long moment, defying him with silence, then says, I'm not hiding again. The thunder answers for both of them. Rain starts in thin needles, tapping the tin roof, turning the yard into a mirror. Rhett unwraps his arm where the last fight tore the skin, and Eliza kneels to help, tearing a strip from her underskirt. Her fingers are steady, her breath warm on his wrist. You can still walk? She asks. Long enough, he mutters. She smiles without humor. You said that yesterday. He looks toward the ridge, where lightning flashes behind the black clouds. Yesterday was easier. The sound of hooves echoes faintly, far yet certain. They both hear it. Bell crosses himself. Rhett loads his Colt, slides the rifle to his shoulder, and says, When the thunder breaks, that's when they'll move. Eliza touches the stock of her own gun, the one he taught her to use, and nods. The first bolt of lightning splits a cottonwood in two, scattering white shards into the rain. Wind slams the barn doors open, and the horses rear. Eliza rushes to calm them while Rhett watches the bend, his jaw tight, rain running down his cheek like sweat. The sky goes green for an instant, then purple. Through the sheets of rain he sees shapes, riders, maybe a dozen, spread wide along the ridge. They're here, he says, almost to himself. Eliza stands beside him, soaked to the bone but fearless. He glances at her and whispers, They'll come with thunder. She chambers around and answers, Then we'll give it back to them. The thunder crashes over Cottonwood Bend as if the heavens themselves fired the first shot. Night swallows the bend whole. The rain turns heavy, the kind that blinds you even with your eyes open. The cottonwoods whip like angry ghosts, and the air smells of gunpowder before a single shot is fired. Jonas Vane's men close in from three sides, their torches dying fast under the storm, their shouts drowned by thunder. Rhett crouches behind the stone wall with Reverend Bell and two farmhands, his hat dripping, his rifle slick in his hands. Wait for the flash, he says. Don't waste a bullet till you see the brim of their hats. Lightning cracks, and for an instant the world becomes bright and terrible. Vane's riders are there, dark coats, glints of iron, water streaming down their faces. Rhett fires first. The bullet finds a man's chest and sends him backward into the mud. Chaos answers. Shots, screams, horses plunging blind through the rain. Eliza holds her ground by the chapel door, the rifle heavy against her shoulder. Her skirt clings to her legs, her hair plastered to her cheek. She remembers Rhett's words from the trail. Steady breath. Let the weight do the work. She inhales, exhales, fires. The gun kicks. Across the yard, a man drops his pistol and screams, his hand shattered. Sheriff Crowell, Vane's bulldog, staggers back cursing into the dark. Reverend Bell hauls a wounded boy inside, whispering prayers drowned by the storm. Eliza reloads with shaking hands, but her aim stays true. Rhett shouts over the wind, Hold the right side! Don't let them circle the chapel. He moves fast through mud and debris, but a muzzle flash erupts to his left, and the next instant he's on the ground, breath gone, blood blooming from his side. Rhett! Eliza's cry cuts through the thunder. She runs to him, drops to her knees, presses her palms to the wound. You're hit! He grits his teeth, tries to rise. Not done yet. Another bullet hits the wall inches from her head. She drags him behind the stone steps, rain and blood mixing on her hands. Stay still, she orders, her voice sharp, commanding now. Bell appears, pale and trembling. He needs binding. Then fetch the linen, she snaps, not looking up. She ties the bandage tight, her fingers red, her eyes burning. Rhett stares at her through the haze of pain, half smiling. "You learned too well," he whispers. "You taught me," she says. "Now let me fight." She grabs his rifle, wipes the rain from her face, and peers around the corner. The yard is a blur of firelight and shadow, men slipping in the mud, reloading behind wagons. She studies their rhythm, counts the seconds between shots, then fires 3 times in quick answer. 2 men fall. 1 cries out for mercy. The rain eases just enough for her to hear Rhett's ragged breath behind her. She touches his shoulder once, soft and quick. "If you fall, I fall with you," she says. He opens his mouth to protest, but she's already back in the doorway, a silhouette framed by lightning, rifle raised against the night. Dawn bleeds slow across Cottonwood Bend, a gray smear through the dying rain. Smoke hangs over the yard like a second sky. The chapel stands half broken, its windows shattered, its bell silenced, and the river below runs red with clay and something darker. Eliza moves through the wreck like a shadow, the rifle clutched tight against her chest. Every breath hurts from the smoke, but she keeps moving. Rhett lies inside against the pew, pale but breathing, the bandage dark with blood. Reverend Bell kneels beside him, praying under his breath. "He needs a doctor," Bell says. "We have none," Eliza answers. "Then you'll be his miracle," Bell murmurs. She looks out the door where the storm has thinned into mist, and something in her steadies. The survivors gather near the fence, 2 men from the town, a handful of women holding children. They look to her now, not to Rhett. "They'll be back," one whispers. Eliza shakes her head. "No, they'll finish it now." The low rumble of horses answers her. Jonas Vane rides through the mist like a ghost in a black coat, his face cut by rain and fury. Behind him limp the last of his men, blood-streaked and wild-eyed. He shouts across the yard, "You think this storm saved you? I built this land. Girl, you belong to me." Eliza steps into the open, rifle raised, her voice clear. "You built graves, not land, and I don't belong to anyone." Vane dismounts, his boots sinking into the mud. He draws his pistol slow, savoring it. "He's dying in there, isn't he?" he says, nodding toward the chapel. "Then you'll come with me, or I'll finish what I started." Lightning flickers in the far clouds, though the rain has stopped. Eliza keeps the barrel steady, her finger on the trigger. "You already finished it when you burned your own name," she says. "Now walk away." He laughs, sharp and hollow. "You haven't got the will." He raises the pistol, too fast to think, only to feel. She fires. The sound cracks through the valley, one clear note after a night of thunder. Vane stumbles, eyes wide, a hand to his chest. He falls backward into the mud, the pistol slipping from his grasp. For a moment, nothing moves. The rain starts again, soft and thin, washing over the dead. Eliza lowers the rifle, her arms trembling. Reverend Bell steps out, looks at the body, then at her. "It's over," he says. She shakes her head. "No, it's begun." She walks back inside, drops to her knees beside Rhett. His eyelids flutter open, a faint smile on cracked lips. "Did you end it?" he whispers. "Yes," she says, brushing the wet hair from his face. "You saved me once. Now I saved you." He coughs, wincing. "Then we're even." "Not yet," she says, pressing his hand to her chest. "You still owe me a sunrise." Outside, the first light finally breaks through the clouds. It strikes the bell tower, glinting off the cross that somehow still stands. The villagers emerge, silent, stepping around the fallen men. Someone begins to sing, soft, uncertain, an old hymn about mercy. Bell joins in, voice cracked but steady. Eliza looks toward the east, watching the light spill over the cottonwoods, turning every leaf to silver. She feels the weight of the night slide off her shoulders, replaced by something heavier yet cleaner. Resolve. Rhett stirs beside her. "We can leave when the horses are ready," he murmurs. "We can rebuild." She smiles faintly. "No," she says. "We start over." By noon, the storm is gone. Smoke drifts upward in lazy ribbons. Reverend Bell and the townsfolk bury the dead near the bend, the graves marked by smooth stones and wildflowers torn from the riverbank. Eliza stands by Rhett's side, holding his arm as he leans on her for balance. The wind moves through the trees with a sound like whispering forgiveness. She glances at the mound where Vane lies, unmarked, and whispers a prayer, not for him, but for the part of herself that once feared him. Then she turns away. They saddle their horses as the sun warms the wet earth. Rhett winces climbing up but manages a grin. "You sure you want to ride?" he asks. She mounts easily, the rifle across her lap. "I'm sure," she says. "The storm's done with us." He nods, adjusts his hat, and looks back one last time at the broken chapel where the bell sways in the breeze, ringing a faint note that might be peace. Together they ride from Cottonwood Bend, the trail glistening under the new light, the air sharp and clean, carrying no echo of the night except the memory of thunder. And as they disappear into the hills, the cottonwoods shed their rain like tears, the river clears, and the valley exhales, as if the land itself has survived the storm. Fort Dawson looks alive from a distance, but up close it smells of sweat, gun oil, and bad promises. The fort's wooden palisades have long since turned into walls for gamblers, drifters, and bounty men who know no law but gold. Rhett and Eliza reach the edge of town at dusk, the last light scraping across the tin roofs and picking out the dust on every face. Rhett wears a gray duster over a black vest, his hair slicked back, his beard trimmed short to pass for a horse trader out of Santa Fe. Eliza's disguise is harder to bear: crimson dress, borrowed earrings, and a painted smile that feels like a mask too heavy for her skin. Her eyes, though, stay sharp as knives. They ride slow through the main street, pretending not to notice the stares. Drunk soldiers spill from the saloon, a piano bangs out an off-key tune, and a poster with Vane's insignia hangs crooked above the sheriff's door. Rhett glances once at it, mutters, "His reach still stinks up this place." Eliza replies under her breath, "Then let's make him choke on it." They tie up the horses near the Silver Ace, the grandest building in Dawson, a 2-story frame of red brick and mirrors, its name glowing under lamplight. Inside, the air swirls with cigar smoke and perfume. Gold coins clatter on tables, dice roll, laughter cuts like glass. A woman in feathers twirls by, brushing Rhett's arm as if sensing money. They move through the crowd like ghosts with a purpose. Rhett heads toward the back corridor, where he knows the office should be. Eliza drifts toward the bar, pretending to flirt with a red-nosed accountant whose vest barely buttons over his belly. "You look like you keep the books around here," she says, leaning close. The man chuckles, slurring, "Maybe I do, maybe I don't. What's it to you, darlin'?" She smiles, slides a gold hairpin across the counter. "I like men who count things." His laugh turns into a wheeze. Within minutes she has him talking about the upstairs safe, about how only the night manager and he hold the keys, about how the papers inside are worth more than the whiskey he drinks. Rhett watches from the hallway, every muscle coiled tight. She follows the man up the narrow stairs, pretending to steady him as he sways. When they reach the small office lined with ledgers and a ticking wall clock, she lets him fall into the chair. His eyes flutter shut. She fishes the chain of keys from his pocket, whispers, "Sleep well, you fool," and crosses to the steel safe behind the painting of the Silver Ace logo. Downstairs, the music grows louder, Someone has won big, and the noise covers the creak of metal as she turns the key. Rhett slips in silently, dripping sweat despite the cool air. "You got it?" he asks. "Almost," she says. The door clicks open. Inside, stacks of paper bound with leather straps, a small tin seal stamped with Vane's crest, and a thick ledger marked Accounts and Holdings. Rhett flips through it fast, eyes scanning columns of forged signatures, payments to officers, land deeds, all proof of the fraud that cost dozens their homes. "This is it," he breathes. But before he can close it, the clock chimes 9 and footsteps echo in the hall. Too quick. Too steady. Not drunk. Eliza's head jerks up. Through the frosted glass, a shadow stops. A man's voice says, "That door should be locked." Rhett's hand goes to his revolver. The knob turns. Eliza snaps the ledger shut. "We're out of time," she whispers. The door bursts open. A dealer from the floor stands there, face twisted in recognition. "I know you, Cottonwood Bend," he shouts. Everything freezes for half a breath, the piano, the laughter, even the rain starting outside. Then the dealer draws his gun. Rhett fires first, the shot tearing through the noise. The man crashes against the wall, blood blooming on the wallpaper. Downstairs, the music stops. Shouts rise. Bells clang. The alarm, a crude iron ringer above the stairwell, starts wailing. Rhett grabs the ledger, stuffs it into his coat. "No more pretending," he says, jaw set as the sound of boots pounds closer. We fight our way out. Sevens, Eliza yanks the seal from the safe, shoves it into her bodice, and meets his eyes. The mirror on the far wall reflects two strangers, faces smeared, eyes fierce, the storm they started already breaking loose behind them. Outside, the thunder of running men grows louder. Inside, Rhett cocks his Colt, smoke curling from the barrel, and mutters, "Let's make Dawson remember our names." Sevens. The first gunshot cracks the illusion of the silver ace like glass under a hammer. Panic swells through the gaming floor, cards scatter, tables overturn, coins spin and roll under boots. Rhett grabs Eliza's hand and pulls her down the back stairs as shouts rise from below. "They're in the office!" Someone yells. The smell of gunpowder mixes with whiskey and perfume, thick enough to choke on. A gambler crashes into them, pistol drawn, and Rhett slams his shoulder into the man's chest, firing once without slowing. "Keep moving," he growls. They burst into the main room where chandeliers swing wildly, casting wild ribbons of light. Eliza dives behind an upturned poker table, reloading with slick hands while Rhett takes cover near the piano. Bullets chew through velvet curtains, splintering the bar mirror into 100 fractured faces. From the balcony above comes a familiar snarl. "You thought Cottonwood Bend was the end?" Sheriff Crowell steps out, arm still bound from the wound Eliza gave him, eyes full of hate. "You should have stayed buried." He fires down, the shot grazing Rhett's shoulder, spinning him halfway before he lands hard behind the piano. "Rhett!" Eliza screams, crawling toward him through spilled liquor and glass. Crowell laughs, loading again. "You got one bullet left, sweetheart. Make it count." She lifts her rifle, breath steady despite the chaos, and shoots the hanging lamp above him. The glass explodes, oil raining fire. Crowell curses, backing away as flames crawl along the railing. Rhett pushes up, blood soaking his sleeve. "We need that ledger out," he rasps. "Forget the fight." "Not without you," she snaps. He shoves the thick book into her satchel, grimaces as he reloads. "Then move." They dash through the burning haze toward the far stairs, smoke curling in ribbons around their heads. The crowd surges for the exits. Men shout, Women scream. A guard swings at Eliza with a club, but she ducks low, drives her elbow into his gut, and takes his revolver. "You taught me too well," she says over the roar. "And you listened," Rhett answers, firing past her shoulder to drop another attacker. They reach the landing when Crowell reappears through the smoke, coat burning at the edge, eyes bright with rage. "You're not walking out of here," he shouts. Rhett turns, firing, but Crowell's shot hits first, slamming into Rhett's upper arm. He stumbles, nearly falling down the steps. Eliza screams his name and empties both guns into the railing, the recoil numbing her arms. Crowell's body hits the stairs, sliding down into the fire below, his gun clattering after him. For a heartbeat, the only sound is the crackle of burning wood. Rhett's breath rattles. Eliza grabs him under the good arm, pulling him toward the upper corridor. "You're bleeding too much," she says. "We both are," he answers. "But we're still breathing." 7. The flames race faster now, licking across the floorboards, driving them toward the windows. Behind them, the bar explodes, sending bottles and fire into the air like fireworks. Rhett smashes the window with his revolver butt, glass raining into the alley. Wind and rain rush in, cold and fierce. Below, the cobblestones glisten and men shout orders. Dawson's town guard finally stirred awake. "We're trapped," Eliza whispers. Rhett glances down at the street, then at the tin awning below. "Not if we fall right." She gives him a hard look. "That's your plan?" "It's worked before." Another explosion answers him, the ceiling starting to sag. "Then jump first," she says. "You're the one with the bad arm." He almost smiles. "Ladies first." She curses under her breath, tucks the ledger tight against her chest, and leaps into the storm. Rhett follows a heartbeat later as the silver ace collapses behind them, swallowed by flame and thunder. They hit the tin awning hard, roll through shards of glass and rain, then drop into the alley below. Eliza lands first, gasping as her knee slams into mud, but she's up before the echo fades. Rhett crashes beside her, clutching his bleeding arm, his face pale in the firelight. Behind them, the silver ace burns like a dying sun, flames pouring from the windows, the roof caving in with a groan that sounds almost human. The town bells start ringing, deep and panicked, summoning guards who don't know what they're riding into. Eliza looks up once at the inferno, the fire reflected in her eyes, and mutters, "So much for quiet." Rhett coughs, smoke curling from his coat. Quiet's overrated. They run. The streets of Fort Dawson twist like a maze. Rain drives sideways, turning dust into slick clay. Drunks stumble out of doorways, shouting half-drunk prayers as sparks rain from the sky. From the fort barracks, armed men spill into the street, lanterns, rifles, confusion. Rhett pulls Eliza down an alley between two warehouses, the smell of coal and wet rope thick enough to hide in. "We need to reach the north gate," he says. "It opens to the freight trail." "Half the army's between us and that gate," she snaps. "Then we make ghosts of ourselves." He grits his teeth, pushing forward. They reach the loading yard behind the blacksmith's foundry, the ground strewn with crates and barrels of iron scrap. Eliza spots a wagon half covered with canvas, horses still hitched, driver missing. "That one," she says. Rhett hesitates. "You sure it's not bait?" "Nothing's safe now." She climbs up, shoving sacks aside to make room. He follows, wincing, blood running down his sleeve into the boards. The air is thick with heat from the fire spreading up the hill. Sparks leap from roof to roof like wild bees. Guards shout somewhere close, "Block the north road." Rhett grabs the reins. "Hold on." They whip the horses hard. The wagon lurches forward, iron rattling, wheels slamming through puddles. They tear down Main Street just as the tower bell tolls again. Flames lick the shutters of the saloon. A sign crashes onto the road. Eliza fires over her shoulder at the men giving chase. One horse drops, another rears. The wagon sways, nearly tipping. "Left!" she cries. Rhett jerks the reins, and they smash through a gate into the tannery yard. The smell of burning hides nearly makes her retch. "We're boxed in," she yells. Rhett looks up, eyes catching the narrow service bridge connecting to the outer wall. "Not if we climb." He leaps down, pulls at the wagon's brake rope, and drags a barrel under the bridge. "Go," he says. "You first." She climbs, slipping in the rain, the ledger tied to her waist. Below, boots splash closer, voices shouting orders, guns cocking. She reaches the bridge, extends her hand. "Rhett!" He looks back once, fire behind him, then grabs her hand. They cross the bridge as the Silver Ace's roof collapses in a shower of sparks. One shot rings out from the street below, grazing the bridge post. Eliza jerks, nearly losing balance, but Rhett steadies her. "Keep moving," he says through gritted teeth. They reach the far wall and jump down into the north ditch, where a line of coal wagons waits for dawn departure. Without speaking, they crawl under the tarp of the last wagon, hearts pounding. The guards rush past above, their lanterns sweeping but blind to the shadows. Rain hisses on the coals like snakes. Eliza presses her ear to Rhett's chest, feels the shallow but steady beat. Minutes stretch like hours. When the whistles sound, shift change at the fort, the wagons start to roll. Their hideout creaks, wheels grinding over the wet stones. Fort Dawson shrinks behind them, the glow of the fire still licking the clouds. Eliza opens the ledger under the tarp, its pages spattered with mud and blood. The ink runs, but the names are still there, officers, judges, merchants, all bound to vain scheme. She touches Rhett's hand and whispers, "This is what the truth costs." He stirs, voice hoarse. "And what it saves." She nods, closing the book. By the time dawn breaks over the hills, the wagons are miles from town. Smoke trails thin against the pale sky. Rhett sits up slowly, his arm bound tight, his jaw set in grim calm. "You did it," he says. "We did it," she answers. The wind carries the faint echo of bells and a distant cheer as the fort's flames die out. Behind them, Fort Dawson smolders, a grave of greed and false oaths. Before them stretches the open road, wet and red from the rain, leading north toward whatever truth waits next. Rhett glances at her, a tired smile flickering. "Next time," he says, "let's steal something easier." Eliza smirks. "Like peace?" "Like breakfast," he says. And as the wagon rolls on through the last of the smoke, the first sunlight breaks over them, painting the mud gold, proof that even after fire, the road still runs forward. The road to Prescott runs like a scar through the hills, wet from last night's rain and shining under the faintest edge of dawn. Rhett and Eliza ride side by side, wrapped in silence that feels too heavy to break. The wagon that carried them from Dawson lies abandoned behind. The horses they took breathe hard but steady, steaming in the cold. Rhett's arm is still bound, his shirt stained where the bandage has soaked through, but his eyes stay clear. "We're close," he says. Eliza nods, clutching the satchel against her chest. The ledger inside feels alive, pages pulsing with every hoofbeat. Ahead, the roofs of Prescott glint with dew and gunmetal. The town wakes slow. Merchants unlatch shutters. A milk wagon creaks down the street, unaware that history is about to draw its gun here. They stop at the courthouse, a tall stone building with a flag limp in the wind. Inside, The air smells of tobacco and coffee gone stale. A man stands behind the desk, tall, broad-shouldered, gray at the temples. Marshal Henry Denton. His badge catches the light, and when he looks up, recognition flickers. "Rhett Callahan," he says, voice gravel low. "I thought the war buried you." Rhett gives a half smile. "Buried me twice. I keep walking back." Denton steps around the desk, eyes flicking to Eliza, then to the satchel. "You brought something?" Sevens. Eliza opens it carefully, places the blood-stained ledger on his desk. Denton flips through the pages, his face tightening as he reads. "My God," he mutters. "Vane's not just a thief. He's built a machine. Names, payments, judges, railroad titles, land grants signed in dead men's names. Every page another noose for the powerful." He runs a thumb along the seal stamped in red wax. "You two know what this means?" Rhett nods. "It means the war never ended. It just changed uniforms." Denton's gaze hardens. "Then we end it proper this time." Sevens. He crosses to the window, draws the curtain. Outside, the dawn flares brighter, red bleeding across the horizon. "I'll telegraph the circuit judge," he says. "We'll have federal marshals here by sundown. The whole line of this territory will burn clean." Eliza stands by the desk, staring at the ledger as if afraid it might vanish. "And Vane?" Denton looks back at her. "He'll run. Men like him always do when the fire comes." Rhett shakes his head. "Not this one. He'll come to burn the fire out himself." Denton studies him a long moment, then says quietly, "Then we'll be ready." Sevens. He orders 2 deputies to lock the courthouse doors and load the armory. The telegraph clacks fast in the side room, brass keys striking like distant gunfire. Rhett slumps into a chair, exhaustion finally catching up. Eliza kneels beside him, cuts away the old bandage, cleans the wound with carbolic and water. He flinches but doesn't complain. "You should rest," she says. "Can't," he answers. "He'll smell fear before smoke." She sighs, tying the new cloth firm. "Then at least try not to die standing up." For the first time in days, a faint smile touches his lips. Outside, the town begins to stir differently now, deputies moving across rooftops, windows shuttering, the quiet kind of preparation that only comes when everyone senses what's coming. The telegraph stops clicking. Denton returns, face carved in iron. The message got through. But the lines went dead right after. "Cut?" Rhett asks. "Most likely," Denton says. "He's closer than we thought." Sevens. Eliza crosses to the window, peers through the slats. In the distance, across the plain, dust rises, thin at first, then thick, a long brown snake twisting toward the town. She feels her throat tighten. "Riders," she whispers. Rhett stands, grips the windowsill with his good hand. Even from here he knows the pattern. 2 abreast, flanking wagons, banners fluttering dark. "Vane," he says. "And a dozen hired guns at least." The first sun climbs the ridge, setting the dust cloud on fire. Denton checks his rifle, the old Winchester gleaming dull under the morning red. "He's not coming to hide," he says. "He's coming to erase." He looks to his deputies. "Seal the main road. Get the families into the church. Any man who can shoot, send him to the square." Then he turns to Rhett and Eliza. "You brought this truth to me. Now you'll have to see it through." Rhett nods once, steady. Wouldn't have it any other way. Eliza shoulders her rifle, the same calm in her eyes that once came only in storms. The first thunder of hooves reaches town like distant drums. Denton cocks his rifle, breathes out slow. If he wants a war, he says, his voice low but clear. We'll give him the morning. The sun breaks the horizon just as the first shot echoes from the hills, and the dawn turns red enough to look like fire. The first bullet cuts through the air before the sun clears the rooftops. It shatters a window of the mercantile and sends glass raining into the street. Then, the whole valley erupts. Prescott becomes a drumbeat of thunder and smoke. Vane's riders sweep in from the east, 30, maybe 40 men, guns flashing, torches in hand. They fire as they ride, setting hay bales and wagons aflame. Marshal Denton's voice bellows across the square. Hold your lines. Protect the church. The deputies scatter to their stations while townsfolk drag barrels into barricades. Rhett, pale but fierce, stands behind an overturned wagon, his Colt steady despite the blood seeping through his sleeve. You said you wanted the morning, he mutters to Denton. Now it's here. Denton only grins. Then let's make it count. Sevens. Eliza is already on the rooftop above them, rain-soaked hair plastered to her cheek, eyes fixed on the shapes darting through the smoke. She shoulders her rifle, breathes slow, and fires. One rider drops from his horse before he can light another fuse. Another shot cracks the post of a banner, sending it tumbling across the street in flame. Nice shot. Rhett yells up, though his voice barely cuts through the roar. She doesn't answer, just reloads and fires again. The acrid taste of powder coats her tongue, the air thick with it. Below, a cart of ammunition explodes, shaking the square. Vane rides at the center of it all, black hat low, coat whipping like a flag. His white stallion is streaked with blood and ash. He shouts orders no one can quite hear over the chaos, his revolver spitting fire at anything that moves. Find the marshal, he roars. Find the woman. Two of his men charge through the barricade. Rhett meets them head on. The first swings a rifle like a club, but Rhett parries, firing point blank into the man's chest. The second lunges from the side. Rhett turns, but his wounded arm betrays him. The gun slips. Eliza's shot takes the attacker clean through the throat. She calls down, "You're welcome." He looks up at her and grins through the sweat. Guess we're still even. Sevens. Then the church bell rings, 3 sharp peals, the signal that the north side has fallen. Smoke boils from that end of town, villagers running, gunfire echoing closer. Denton grabs a crate of shells, shouts, "They're pushing through the alley. We hold them here, or it's over." He climbs to the saloon balcony, firing down with both barrels, reloading without pause. Rhett joins him, side by side, 2 veterans fighting ghosts that wear new faces. "Vane's got a Gatling," Denton shouts. "He'll chew us to bone if we don't take it." Rhett nods. Then we go first. He breaks from cover, sprinting low across the street as bullets hammer the dust around his boots. Eliza sees him and curses. Damn fool. She slings her rifle and climbs down, jumping from the roof to the lower awning, then to the ground. She lands hard, knees screaming, but keeps running. Together they reach the wagon where the Gatling gun sits, mounted, smoking, manned by 2 of Vane's soldiers. Rhett ducks behind a trough, takes aim. "You flank right," he says. "I'll draw." "You'll get killed," she snaps. "Better me than everyone else." He breaks from cover before she can argue, firing his revolver into the wagon's wheel. One soldier turns, startled, and Eliza's shot takes him down. The other swings the Gatling toward Rhett, finger on the crank. Rhett fires, misses. The barrel begins to spin, then jams. Eliza leaps onto the wagon, slamming the rifle butt into the gunner's jaw, knocking him cold. "We're even again," she pants. "Stop keeping score," Rhett growls. They turn the Gatling toward the eastern ridge where Vane's men are regrouping. Rhett braces his bad arm against the mount, pulls the trigger. The weapon screams. Bullets rake the ridge, tearing through brush and riders alike. Horses rear, men scatter. For a moment it feels like victory, until a shot cracks from the far end of the square. Denton, on the balcony, staggers, a burst of red blooming across his chest. Vane lowers his smoking revolver, voice booming. "Justice dies with you, Marshal." Sevens. Eliza freezes. Rhett looks up just in time to see Denton collapse into the dust. "No." He runs toward him, dropping the Gatling. Vane's men open fire again. A bullet finds Rhett's chest, spinning him backward into the mud. Eliza screams his name, the sound ripped raw from her throat. She crawls to him, bullets striking sparks from the stones around her. His eyes flutter open. "You finish it," he whispers, blood at the corner of his mouth. "Don't let him walk away." She presses her hand to his wound, shaking her head. No, not like this." He smiles faintly. "Like every time before, you make it right." His hand slips from hers. The world around her fades to noise and flame. Vane's horse rears on the far side of the square, its rider laughing over the bodies. Eliza's tears mix with ash as she rises, picks up Rhett's gun, and looks at the burning sky. The dawn has come, but it bleeds redder than any she has ever seen. For a long heartbeat, everything stands still, the wind, the smoke, even time itself. Rhett's revolver feels heavy in Eliza's hand, still warm from his grasp. The square burns around her, the air screaming with heat, but she doesn't feel it. She only sees Vane, sitting high on that white horse like a demon wearing daylight. His eyes find her through the smoke. He grins, teeth bright against the soot. "I thought you'd run," he calls, voice booming over the roar. "But you've got more fire than I gave you credit for." She steps forward, boots sinking in the blood and mud, her voice low and steady. "I don't run from the truth." The hammer clicks as she draws the gun to eye level. "And neither will you." Sevens. Vane laughs, a sound sharp enough to cut glass. "Truth?" he mocks. "The truth is written by whoever's left standing." He spins his pistol in his hand, the sunlight glinting off the barrel. "So let's write it." He kicks his horse, charging straight at her. She fires once, twice. The first shot grazes his arm, the second hits the saddle. He fires back, the bullet tearing through her sleeve, hot and searing. She drops behind a fallen wagon, rolls, reloads. The gunmetal burns her palm. Her heart pounds so loud she can't hear the world, only the rhythm of it, like war drums echoing inside her ribs. She stands again as his horse skids to a stop a few feet away. Vane dismounts, breathing hard, blood streaking his coat. "You think you're justice?" he sneers. "You're nothing but a runaway playing hero." He stalks toward her, each step crunching glass. She backs away slowly, dragging herself behind the burning wagon. "No," she says, voice shaking but fierce. "Not justice, just consequence." She fires. The bullet slams into his leg. He stumbles but stays upright. He raises his gun, firing wild. The shot grazes her ribs. Pain explodes white behind her eyes. She falls to one knee, gripping the revolver tight, the heat of it branding her skin. "You can't stop me," he growls, limping closer. "You and your lover already lost." She raises the barrel again, meeting his gaze. "Maybe, but you're done hurting anyone else." Sevens. He lunges first. Their guns fire almost in the same breath. The blast echoes off the courthouse walls, louder than thunder. Vane jerks backward, eyes wide, a hole blooming red in his chest. His pistol drops into the mud. He takes one last staggering step, reaching for her as if to drag her down with him, then collapses. The white horse bolts, disappearing into the smoke. Eliza sinks to the ground, chest heaving, the gun slipping from her fingers. Around her, the battle still rages in fragments, distant shouts, the crack of rifles, but the heart of it is over. The monster at the center has fallen. For a moment she can't move. The pain hits her all at once, the burn in her side, the blood soaking her blouse. She presses a trembling hand to the wound and turns toward where Rhett fell. Through the haze, she sees motion. Small, impossible motion. A hand. His hand. He's alive. "Rhett!" she gasps, crawling through the mud toward him. He's half buried under debris near the saloon steps, his chest rising shallow but steady. She pulls the boards off, fingers raw. "You stubborn fool," she whispers, tears streaking down her face. His eyes flicker open, gray and dazed. "You finish it?" he rasps. She laughs, half sob, half relief. "I finished it." "Good," he says, voice weak. "Because I'm too tired to." Sevens. Marshal Denton limps into view, one arm bound, his coat burned at the shoulder. "He's down?" he asks, glancing at the fallen figure of Vane. "Down for good," Eliza answers. Denton kneels, checking Rhett's pulse, nodding once. "He'll live," he says quietly, "by the grace of every bullet that missed." Around them, the townsfolk begin to emerge from cellars and doorways, eyes wide at the ruin. The flames start to ease, the smoke thinning to gold as the sun climbs. Denton stands, looks toward the horizon where the light bleeds through the last of the storm clouds. "Justice breathes again," he murmurs. Eliza helps Rhett sit up, his weight heavy against her shoulder. He winces but smiles faintly. "You're bleeding," he says. "So are you," she replies. "Guess that makes us even again." He chuckles, the sound hoarse and broken but alive. "You never were one for running." "Not when you're still breathing," she says softly. He glances at the rising sun, red as fire across the square. "That's a good color for a new day." She looks at him, then at the ledger still tucked inside her coat, the proof of every lie finally paid for in blood. "It's the color of a reckoning," she says. The bells of Prescott ring again, slow this time, not for warning but for mourning, for victory, for peace. People begin to gather the wounded, douse the last fires, lift the fallen. A small boy picks up Vane's hat from the mud, stares at it, then tosses it into the flames. Eliza and Rhett sit side by side on the courthouse steps, smoke curling around them, the world suddenly quiet. The light spills over their faces, warm and endless. Rhett leans his head back, eyes closing. "You know," he says, "I think we finally outran the storm." Eliza takes his hand, fingers lacing through his. "No," she says. "We just learned how to stand in it." Sevens. The sun climbs higher, and the fire in the sky fades to gold. Prescott breathes again. Among the ashes, two figures remain, battered, bloodied, but unbroken, proof that sometimes dawn has to burn before it can shine. A month passes before the gun smoke truly clears. The trials come fast in Prescott. Marshal Denton, pale but unbowed, stands before the court with the blood-stained ledger laid open on the bench. The judge reads every line aloud, each name another crack in the foundation of men who thought themselves untouchable. Vane's surviving lieutenants hang their heads, the gavel falls, the verdict thunders through the room. Guilty on all counts, fraud, murder, treason. The land stolen under false deeds is ordered returned. When the sentence of the gallows is read for Jonas Vane, the crowd outside does not cheer. They only breathe again, as if justice itself had been holding its breath for too long. Rhett watches from the back of the courtroom, his arm still bound in a sling, a faint line of red along his jaw where a bullet once kissed him. Eliza sits beside him, quiet, eyes steady. When the bailiff leads Vane away in irons, he turns his head once, searching the room. His gaze finds Eliza, but she doesn't flinch. He opens his mouth to speak, perhaps to curse, perhaps to plead, but no sound comes. She only says, softly enough that only Rhett hears, "Let the silence finish it." And it does. The following days move slow and golden. Cottonwood Bend rises from its ashes like a scar healing. The church bell hangs again, straight this time. Fences are rebuilt, crops replanted. Rhett spends the mornings walking the ridge above the valley, testing the strength of his shoulder. He cannot yet lift a rifle without pain, but he can raise a cup of coffee, and that is enough. Eliza helps the townsfolk remark their deeds, handing back the papers that once bore forged seals. The people call her Miss Callahan now, though the name is not yet hers. Reverend Bell rides in from Fort Dawson one bright morning with dust on his coat and a Bible wrapped in oilskin. He finds them by the riverbank, Rhett repairing a fence post while Eliza gathers wildflowers. "Seems I owe you two a proper ceremony," Bell says, voice light but eyes shining. Rhett looks up, smiling. "You married us once in haste," he says. "Maybe it's time to do it right." Bell nods toward the bend where the old cottonwood tree stands, its trunk scarred by lightning, its branches heavy with white bloom. "Under that one," he says. "It's seen enough storms to bless another." Evans. The afternoon glows warm as honey. People come quietly. Denton, hat in hand, a few townsfolk, 2 children clutching candles. The air smells of river water and sweet grass. Rhett wears his old cavalry coat, the silver buttons polished. Eliza's dress is simple, cotton and lace, the color of dawn. The scars on their hands are still pink, the proof of what they've survived. Bell opens his Bible, the wind turning the pages on its own. "You've already faced fire together," he says. "Now face peace, and don't let it scare you." Sevens. When it's time for vows, Rhett clears his throat, glancing at her with that crooked half-smile she's come to love. "I don't promise to keep you safe from everything," he says. "Only to walk beside you when it breaks." She steps closer, fingers trembling slightly as she takes his hand. "And I don't promise to follow you everywhere," she says. "Only where the road means something." He grins. "That'll do." Bell smiles and lifts his hand. "Then, by God's grace and your own stubborn hearts, I pronounce you husband and wife, for real this time." Sevens. The wind moves through the cottonwood, sending a soft flurry of white across the clearing like snow. Eliza looks up, eyes bright with tears. "This time," she whispers, "it's not to save anyone." Rhett tilts his head, watching her. "No?" She shakes her head, smiling through it. "It's to begin." He laughs, pulls her close, and kisses her under the tree that once marked an ending. The crowd claps quietly, and Bell's voice carries like a benediction. "May the world be kinder this go-round." Sevens. That evening, they stand on the ridge where the river bends toward the west. The valley glows with the orange of sunset, smoke from the rebuilt chimneys rising straight for once. Rhett's horse, Scout, stamps impatiently. Eliza's mare nuzzles her shoulder. "You sure you want to leave?" Denton asks behind them. "You've earned a place here." Rhett shakes his head. "A man shouldn't grow roots where he bled too much." Denton nods, understanding. "Then ride easy." He tips his hat and walks back toward town, the sound of his boots fading into the quiet. They mount up as the last light breaks into flame across the horizon. Rhett looks back once at the cottonwood, now silver in the dusk. Guess that's what peace looks like, he says. Eliza smiles. No, that's what forgiveness looks like. They ride together down the dirt road, the wind in their hair, the river whispering beside them. The sky turns from gold to deep crimson, and the first stars appear, small, patient, eternal. As Cottonwood Bend drifts away behind them, the tree shivers in the breeze, scattering its blossoms over the ground. Some fall into the river and drift downstream, carrying with them the last traces of fire and grief. The land, at last, feels alive again. And somewhere in the distance, the faint echo of a church bell rings through the valley, slow, steady, like a heartbeat learning to trust itself again. Rhett reaches across the space between their horses and takes Eliza's hand. Neither speaks. The road stretches ahead, long and open, lined with light. The wind smells of rain and new earth. And as they disappear over the rise, the sun lifts its last flame above the trees, burning not for war, not for loss, but for the beginning of everything that waits beyond the bend. And as their silhouettes fade into the golden horizon, the valley breathes again, carrying only the whisper of wind and the promise of peace. Because salvation doesn't come from miracles, it comes from the one who stands beside you through the storm. Help our channel grow, like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us which moment from this story touched your heart the most.